Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Our guest today is my great friend Gary Wagner, the editor of goldforecast.com. Gary, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here as always.
It's such a huge pleasure having you back on Wall Street Silver. I wanted to bring you on to talk to you about what's going on in the markets. A lot of people have been talking online about you see gold going up and keeping resilient and strong, but they don't want, silver is not where they want it to be. What do you see there, Gary? What's going on?
Well, first, there is an obvious decoupling that's occurred quite some time ago between the former tandem relationship of gold and silver, and I think that was because both of them acted as a safe haven asset. Times of turmoil, they both tended to move up. We saw that disconnect come a little while ago. But we also saw silver become very, very sensitive to moves in the industrial equities
Right.
because it's highly used in that. However, the caveat is the recent declines we've seen are occurring in conjunction with the S&Ps going to all-time record highs, which is kind of a head twister, a quagmire, an undefined answer to why that is. I was doing an interview the other day, and the interviewer said that currently news came out that China has a scarcity of silver. They're raising their prices.
Oh,
I
really?
looked at the chart and it was down hard that day. And I said, well, that might be true, but at least the traders in the States are not supporting that assumption.
So, Gary, you were talking about China and the silver situation. Can you go in depth about that? Like, why aren't we supporting that model? Because you said you checked the markets and it was down that day. Can you go in depth about that?
I can't go in depth, but the comment that I can make is that the institutional and big traders, if they bought that story, if they believed that that would have an impact on overall silver supply demand scenarios, meaning it would dwindle the supply and increase the demand, we would have seen it move higher, which it hasn't. So, my conclusion is either it's something put out there so traders can go short, or it's not that much of a big deal in terms of the supply on hand.
Hmm.
So, because the professional investors, the hedge funds, are trading with large amounts of capital, meaning they can move markets, and they're betting on what they believe to be the outcome, I can only assume that they're not putting the same kind of emphasis on that story that others might.
Absolutely. And we've a lot of online chatter is talking about, Powell, what his next move is. And the banking issue is they have so many unrealized losses on their books, like these major banks across the US, even in Europe, where they're investing all this money into commercial real estate, but interest rates are still high. So, but soon enough, this bank term lending fund is going to be up, expiring in March. What effects do you think that will happen on, the whole market in general?
Well, I mean, if we look back in time to the banking crisis, we know what the worst of all possible outcomes could be, which is major bank failures and the government reaching in their pocket and using your money, my money, and our listeners' money to bail them out. And they'll take that money and give fat bonus checks to the executives.
Right.
That's typically what we have seen. I think that overall, the banking system, aside from the investments in commercial real estate, because that has been taking a huge hit in terms of pricing, um, is fairly sound. I think it's on a case by case basis. It's going to be the smaller banks that aren't as well capitalized as the large major institutions that can figure out ways to absorb the hits. They have a lot of techniques to do that.
Right.
And if push comes to shove, they're too big to fail, so to speak. And that has proved to be right in more instances than not. But it is an issue that we need to be concerned with. And there is the potential for that to work its way into the economy and wreak some havoc. Absolutely.
So I just wanted to let everyone know about our new sponsor, Strategic Wealth Preservation. They are an international precious metals dealer and they are a secured storage provider that have headquarters in the Cayman Islands. The company owns and operates a large Class 3 UL rated vault in the Grand Caymans, and they offer other strategic locations as part of its global storage network. They specialize in the acquisition, secure storage, and liquidation of precious metals for individuals, companies, trusts, and wealth management professionals on behalf of their clients. So if you guys want to check them out, the link is in the description below. And do you see the Fed at that point having to turn on the printers again? Do you think they have to like start funding these banks and bailing these banks out because they don't want to see the domino effect continue, or start a new bank funding term program?
Obviously, they will have to do something.
Right,
I don't, and this is only my conjecture. I never think they've turned the spigots off.
right,
There's lots of reasons that inflationary pressures are going up. But I think we touched a little upon this last time, is that as goods and services get more expensive, even if inflation comes in at a lower number, those higher prices are still higher prices. They're not going to go down.
right.
So fighting inflation simply means stopping it from moving unrealistically higher. And the truth of the matter is that means the dollar buys less.
Hmm.
And that's been a trend that's been going on ever since the final nail in the coffin, which was Nixon taking us off the gold standard, of course. And even before that, we saw some damage. But once the dollar was fully fiat and not related to any hard asset, gold has had the same buying power as it always has.
Right.
And the dollar has been shrinking and shrinking year by year, year over year, decade over decade. And if you think about it, I know I'm I don't even want to name my age, but I'm not a young spring chicken. I'm really an old rooster. And I remember the good humor truck going by and taking my dollar and being able to stock up, and the least expensive was the nickel not lollipops, but frozen ice at a nickel, and candy
Wow.
bars were a nickel. And um when you think about, and that's not that long ago,
Yeah.
when you think about how much less the dollar buys now, that's directly due to A, the fact that we're off the gold standard, and B, what they call it inflation. I call it watering down the dollar more
Hmm.
than anything else, because there's lots of reasons, supply chain, bottlenecks, this and that. But the truth of the matter is, every time it costs us more, what we are really saying is the dollar buys us less. And
Exactly.
that's why I love gold and silver, because both to some degree, uh, silver and gold have different correlations, but to some degree have the same buying power they had 50 years ago, even 100 years ago. And that trend is still intact. So for your subscribers, the followers of Wall Street Silver, who are commonly called silver stackers, they have the ability with that physical silver to
Right.
purchase the same with the same buying power, let's say, of when they bought that silver a year or 2 or 3 years ago. Even though silver hasn't gone up that much, it hasn't kept up with gold. But what it has eloquently done is allowed them to have an asset that would allow them to buy goods and services at pretty much the same price as 5 or 10 years ago. And
Right.
tell me what other liquid asset out there can make that claim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real estate's
You
great,
nailed
but
it.
it's not liquid.
Yeah, yeah, you absolutely nailed it, Gary. And you see now, like the way you explained it is perfect. But how long can they kick the can down the road uh, before this is all over, before the circus is over, and you see hyperinflation? What, we got another 100 years, 50 years? What? How long do you
You
think it'll
know,
take?
I have to tell you that I've thought that that was something that couldn't be sustained forever. Powell has come out and said that our national debt is unsustainable. Yellen's come out and said the same thing.
Right.
It's a worrisome thing. I think it should have imploded years ago. And
Yeah.
I do not understand why they're able to kick the can down the road and the can continues to move and it doesn't just implode. Um, how long can it take? I have no idea because I'm extremely surprised they've been able to do it this long.
Yeah.
When you look at Keynesian economics, it's rarely new. It's really a scientific experiment. Because if you look back before even 100 years ago, when all countries were on a modified gold standard, a treasury was able to spend what was in the treasury. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
When the treasury ran dry and the king wanted a new summer home, they raided and pillaged and raped the next town over.
Yeah.
That's how they got the treasury back up because there was no borrowing money. You couldn't go to these workers and say, build this for me and I'll take care of you later, unless they were slaves,
Yeah.
and the Egyptians had it and the US had it for a while. But how long is this sustainable? I cannot give you a answer vetted in any kind of intellectual, concrete assumptions that make sense even to me,
Yeah.
because they've done it longer than I ever thought they could. And what, every couple of months, we're raising the ceiling of our budget deficit. So,
You're right.
we're what, 44 trillion plus. The fact is, I think Powell said our national debt is equivalent to every citizen in the US owing $1 million.
That's
I
crazy.
believe that's what he said.
That's crazy.
Okay, that thought is pretty scary,
Yeah.
first of all.
That's crazy.
If so my kids, I'm raising kids, the new kids coming in the world are massively in debt, but that's the good news. The better news, or that's the bad news. The good news is Biden's paying off the debt of student loans for
Yeah.
those 20 years ago. And where's he getting that money? Well, it's just creating more debt.
Yeah.
Now we're in the position where we're supporting wars in Ukraine and in Israel, right or wrong, morally correct action or not. I will not take a stand on that. But where's that money coming from? In other
Mm.
words, if we're already working with a treasury that's working outside the realm of what we actually have, how long can it go on? Which is your question. So I put it back to you. How long do you think it can go on?
Yeah, you know what? I'm on the same page as you, Gary. You know how crazy it's been in the since 2020 and everything that's been going on, and they didn't even. I've heard that they just someone just caught the bank funding term lending program a while back just out of nowhere. If they didn't catch it, nobody would have seen it. So, there's so many crazy things going on. But me personally, maybe like I'm thinking maybe like 10 years. I'll give it 10,
Yeah.
I'll give it 10, 15 years. We'll see how long. Because then eventually the hyperinflation, people can't buy bread and food and, yeah.
Well, typically though, there's a magical fix to hyperinflation though, right? What have other countries done when they got to that point? They confiscated all the money, they issued new notes in
Right.
which there was a differential in value, and they started the clock all over
So
again.
the digital currency, if
Well,
it's that's
not
their
so
only
much
play.
digital, but I mean, many African countries where the inflation or the hyperinflation got so bad, and Hungary was one of them too. They had to reissue a new currency to replace the old currency and artificially gave that a higher value based on what? I have no idea. Which seems to be the only solution I've seen for this type of scenario playing out to the end game. So the end game was just another end game. And
Yeah,
so the can was replaced with another can. Um, it's a scary thought. And that's why I'm such an advocate of physical ownership of precious metals, because
absolutely.
as long as I've known, there's been intrinsic value to land, gold, silver, some other things, but land is great, property is great, but it's illiquid in times of turmoil. Gold and silver have always had liquidity, have always had intrinsic value. That's why the Egyptians used it. And in fact, the hardest thing to mold is silver, much less pliable than gold. And that's why
Interesting.
in King Tut's tomb, his mask was made of silver.
Oh,
The
interesting.
Egyptians actually valued silver far beyond the value of gold. I don't know if that's a fact that our subscribers are well aware of,
Interesting.
but it's much harder to work. So the craftsmanship that they had to do to recreate his face, there was a gold and underneath was silver, is quite amazing. So they are precious metals. Take a look at platinum. I think it's like 800 or something plus. Palladium's overtook everything. Then
Hmm.
platinum, which was the most expensive metal, is now the least expensive metal. The key, though, is they all still have intrinsic value. They're just relative. I like gold and silver.
Absolutely. I'm on the same page as you. Gary, it's such a huge, huge pleasure having you come down to Wall Street Silver. Where can people reach you at? Where can they connect with you?
Certainly. Our website, thegoldforecast.com, allows them to go on our site, look around, and try our premium service for free for 14 days. For
Nice.
those who want to look at our archives, we've got over 3,000 recorded shows on our YouTube channel, The Gold Forecast. And on Fridays, we actually release the live, most up to date video, which allows them, of course, to see my most current thinking. There's also a Bitcoin section that is on our website, as well as our YouTube channel for those out there, because I know many silver stackers are also looking at the cryptos.
Of course,
I'm
yeah.
not the guy you want to go to, but we have someone here, my associate, has been doing it for a while. Yeah, he happens to be my son, but he is really good at it on his own. So
Nice.
you can get information on Bitcoin, gold, and silver right on our site. You can get a free trial for our premium service. Bitcoin offers a free trial for his full service because he's just getting started. That's the best way to move forward if you want to know more about what we do here at Wagner Financial.
Absolutely. It's such a huge pleasure having you on, Gary. And hopefully in the future, we'd love to have you back. Like in the next month or so, I'll for sure bring you back and we can update everyone what's going on in the markets.
Ask and I shall come. You know I love coming on this show.
Awesome. Talk to you guys soon.